Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Chelsea Lambert of Lex Tech Review, and I'm so pleased to be sharing this afternoon session with founder of the Newsletter Pro, Sean Buck. Sean, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Hey, Chelsea, thanks for having me. I'm super pumped to be here and look forward to chatting for a little while.
Yeah. So some of you may have seen we've got the Law Firm Marketing Buyer's Guide coming out in just a little while. And so the Newsletter Pro is the only company that I've actually, found and included in the guide. The guide is a collection of our product reviews on all of the leading marketing firms and partners. And I really consider marketing service companies as a partnership as opposed to a vendor that you work with. And Sean in particular is just crazy energetic, really amazing, dynamic speaker, a marketing mogul, serial entrepreneur. Sean, I didn't even know, but you have 5 boys. That is a
I know.
handful.
That is a
My
lot. Yeah. I told my dad I did everything I could to keep the family name going. So,
Well, I can only imagine with as busy as the business is, making the Inc. 500 list twice,
yeah.
2,975% growth 2 years in a row, and Marketer of the Year. So thank you so much for carving out some time for us this afternoon.
Anything for you.
So let's get into the topic of today's discussion, and that is, you built the Newsletter Pro. The power of law firm newsletters, and I travel all over as you do too, talking about newsletters being a component of law firm marketing and how important that is. But after doing my product interview with your team, I had no idea the level of depth and work that goes into the newsletters that you put together for the firms, and it makes sense that they deliver the type of performance and feeling that you get when they actually get delivered in the mail, given the amount of hours that your team puts in. So can you tell me a little bit about the background that led you to start the Newsletter Pro and really your approach to growing the business and working with your law firm clients?
Yeah, totally. So basically it all started really back in 2002. And actually maybe even early or late 2001, but I was actually trying to buy another business. So I spent my 20s, most people were jumping from job to job. I spent my 20s like buying and selling companies, trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I was big. And so I was on to my second real company. And I say real company because it was like, wasn't like some side hustle I had in high school or, early college or whatever. It was like, it wasn't selling pagers to my friends, which was something I did in high school, and so you might not even remember pagers. You might be too young for
No,
the.
I yeah.
Okay, I can explain them to you if you're not clear, just in case. But no, it wasn't any of that, right? It was my second real business. And see, I'm a little bit of a nerd. I actually really enjoy learning about businesses and business models and marketing and sales and how they run. And so I went through and I contacted, I don't even know how many, 50, 60, 70 different franchises, because I thought at the time that was the way to go. Like, you buy into a franchise, right? It's a proven system. Of course, that's what you do, right? And I contacted them and I got what at the time were called UFOC documents. Now they're called FDD documents. But I'd get all these big legal documents and I would devour them. I would read them. I would study them. I'd learn about the business models. And the interesting thing is that I'm a pretty analytical guy, so I do a lot of studying, and then once I make up my mind, I want to move really fast and get started and take action, and that's kind of my process. And so that was my process back then, even if I didn't realize that was my process at that time, but that was my process. So I get all these documents. People are calling me, salespeople are calling me, trying to sell me franchises, and but I wasn't ready. I had 2 companies at the time that I had to sell. Before I could even afford to buy something else, right? And they were up for sale, but I had to sell them, and I wasn't ready to buy. Every single one of these companies forgot about me, with the exception of this one lady who kept mailing me her monthly newsletter, and I get it every month. And I remember I would devour this thing. It was a really well done newsletter. I would just absolutely devour this thing, and then I'd make my my girlfriend, now my wife, but she was my girlfriend at the time, I'd make her read it too, right? Because then we had to have stuff to talk about, right? So she needed to read it despite her having almost, I'd probably say I know the exact amount of interest she had in it. It was zero. She had exactly zero interest in reading these, but no, actually she did. She actually did really enjoy them. But at first she's like, what are you talking about? Why would I read this? But then she actually started looking forward to them as well, like I did. But she wasn't business minded at the time. Now she is, but at the time she didn't have a lot of interest in business in general. And so she would go through, she'd read it, I'd read it, we'd talk about it. I actually saved every single one of them. And funny thing is, I ran across this binder when I moved about 3 years ago. I have every single one of those newsletters still to this day that this lady sent me from not only when I was a prospect, but ultimately she did such a good job with that newsletter, she convinced me to buy. I actually bought earlier than I was planning, so I'd only sold one of the two companies that I needed to sell. But her annual convention was coming up, and she had hyped it up and pumped it up so much, and I wanted to go so bad, but I had to buy and be an owner to go. So I wasn't planning on buying until July of 2002, and I ended up buying in April of 2002 so that I could go to the early June convention and learn with all these other franchisees. And put some money on a credit card. Good old Uncle Discover floated me there for a little while, and but the interesting thing is that wasn't the end of the newsletter journey for me. She actually had a requirement in her franchise agreement that I send a newsletter out every single month. Now, she made a huge mistake in this, right? Instead of giving us 3 pages worth of really good content or whatnot, that because it's, we were all the same company, right? And then letting us do like a personal story on the cover or whatever, she made us come up with our own every month. So Chelsea, I proceeded to do something that few others have probably managed to do. I proceeded to create the world's most boring newsletter, not 1 month, but for 24 consecutive months. I mean, 24 months, I was the rating champion back in 2002 through 2004 of creating the most boring newsletter ever. And to tell you how bad it was, here's some of the things I talk about. What to do to get an invisible stain out. So you're at a party, the unthinkable happens. At the 7th glass of wine, someone bumps into you and you spill it on yourself, right? And you now have it doesn't show a stain, but when the dry cleaning chemicals hit it, a stain comes up. Do you hear how boring this is, right? I explained to people about this stuff, right? This was so bad. We talk about how to remove grass stains. I mean, it was like, it would be kind of like a lawyer going through some really detailed case law to their personal injury, a client, right? So,
these are the forms that we're filing today. This is the motion that's going to be required to start your case.
As they glaze over, right? And so like, that's not what you want to do. That's not how you want to do that. But that's what I did. And then finally, I'm like, you know what? This sucks, man. No one ever, this newsletter just does not work. That's what I thought. And I even started doing like a little informal survey. Everyone who'd call in, I'd ask them if they'd read the newsletter. And like no one was reading the newsletter. And so I said, you know what? I'm just gonna put interesting stuff in there. I'm just gonna tell stories. I'm gonna create a little personality, for myself. I'm gonna tell some stories. I'm gonna be funny. I'm gonna be entertaining, and let's see how that goes. And I changed the newsletter up one day to that, and like it was like magic happened. Like overnight, all of a sudden I'm getting referrals. People are talking to me about the newsletter. The first article I put in was about coming back from Disney World with my kids. I'd taken my kids to Disney World, and I had multiple people tell me either about their Disney World trip or ask me, hey, we're getting ready to go to Disney World. What's the must do? What restaurants were good? Whatever the case may be. And it all of a sudden started to work. And I realized there was something there. Like I had something. But despite it working, it was really difficult for me to put out every month. Like I struggled getting it out because there were so many responsibilities in running the day-to-day operations of the business and marketing and sales and all that stuff that I struggled with it. And so fast forward a little bit, when I decided I was going to go, I'd sold some previous companies and I was going to go start a new company. It's 2011. And I'm like, you know what? everybody is talking about all this digital marketing, and I'm sure it's great, and you know it's working, and I do a little bit of it. At the time I did a little bit of it. We do a fair amount now, but you know what, offline still works, and I don't care what anyone says, that stuff's not going away. Like it's going to be a part of what works. And I said I'm going to start a print newsletter company, and all my friends laughed at me. They all told me I was a fool because they were all starting like SEO marketing companies and Facebook advertising companies. You're an idiot for doing this. But lo and behold, here we are. I've got about 60 employees. We send out 500,000 newsletters a month or more, and we just, I mean, our clients love it. We crush it for them. So, you know, they don't think I'm quite that dumb anymore, which is good. So it helps my ego. It's a very, very fragile ego, so I need a lot of help there. And so anyhow, but yeah, that's kind of the long backstory. So.
Awesome. Well, you touched on something that I want to dig into. So,
Yeah.
you know, digital is always the easy way to quickly turn something out. And the difference between a digital newsletter and a print newsletter, and I do agree with you that there is still very much a place. Like in a lot of ways, the mailbox is emptied out. So
Yep.
whatever's left inside the mailbox, like we went from getting like stacks of junk mail like this to now, you know, like this, but our inboxes are just, you know, barraged with tons and tons of mail every single day. So I personally just came from a conference where there's some of the most successful personal injury firms in the country. And these firms, and immigration as well, and a few other practice areas. But the one theme between all of them was that they poured their hearts into a personal newsletter every single month. And they would, you know, walk around and show the physical piece of paper. And I mean, what actually gets delivered, I mean, it's the magazine quality, what you guys put out. And so, you know, I'd love if you could kind of share what you feel are the components of a great newsletter, how you and your team approach working with a firm, and how you really define what's going to go into that print piece every single month. And so I'm going to actually turn over presenter control to you, because I know you've got some slides to show us.
Yeah, I'll pull those up in a second. I mean, to your point of what's in the mailbox compared to the inbox, right? So right now, the average American is receiving 147 emails a day. So that's quite high. And the average mailbox has 3.9 pieces of mail per day.
Oh, wow.
0 on Sunday, so that's a free day there, I guess. But you know, where would you rather compete? And I tell people this, and sometimes it comes across as you know, sometimes people think it's a little bit weird or different, but most people want what I have here when I explain what I do with email. See, I can't get through them all. I get so many, I get more than 147 emails in a day. I just cannot get through all the emails. And so my assistant, her number one KPI that we measure is clearing my inbox, basically responding to emails, organizing them. So we report on what's called a big three, and it is her number one big three. And she manages my email and then filters it down to the 10 or 15 a day that I absolutely do need to respond to or needs my input. But so much so that even our morning meeting is, hey, if she doesn't know how to answer an email, she's asking me, like, how do you want me to respond to this email? But it's become such a burden on so many people that that I now have someone who does it for me. There may be lawyers watching this who have someone that does this for them, or now they're saying, I can get someone to do that for me.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. That's the next thing I want to do, right? You know, and so yeah, where do you want to compete? Do you want to compete with the 3.9 pieces in the mailbox or the inbox? And then the last thing I'll say to that is what works today. It doesn't matter what we're talking about, online, offline, it doesn't matter. What works today is attention. If you can get someone's attention and hold their attention, that's where the value is. If we were to go pull the KPIs, the key performance indicators for Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or any of them, 100% guarantee you that one of the number one numbers tracked is time on site. right? Because that's how much attention you have. If Facebook goes from having an average of 31 minutes a day on site to 27 minutes a day, people lose their jobs. Like, people are getting fired. It's a huge thing. So think about it. What if you could have someone's attention for 10, 15, 20 minutes? Like, that is so valuable in today's economy. And that's one of the benefits the newsletter gives you, outside of just its performance-based stuff, but you have this attention. And so yeah, I'll talk about, let me pop over to my screen here.
Yeah, and just while you do that, a couple of points too. I mean, you've got multiple generations in a household. So for example, I mean, you've got, like, my family's over at my house, and there's things like physical, tangible. It's that emotional connection that you make when you physically touch the paper. It's how it lays out or sits on your kitchen counter, or on, you know, the spot where you keep your mail, what's on the back of it. So I mean, it's not something like an email where you acknowledge it, you make a decision what to do with it, and either it goes into the trash or it goes, you know, falls to the bottom of the pile. This is something that is physically out, waiting to get that attention on multiple occasions throughout the day, week, or month.
Well, yeah, and then to even add to that, this is the funny thing. I did this survey at a lawyer convention recently, who I knew for a fact that roughly half the people or more in the audience were either on my list, so either got my newsletter right in the mail every month, or were clients. Like, this is what I've been doing for years. We work with a ton of people that are there, and there was probably 300 people in the room, and so I knew that a good number of them were there. And I did a very informal survey, obviously, but I asked for a show of hands while I was speaking, and I said, all right, how many people get the newsletter, right? You know, and roughly half the room's hands went up, and I said, okay, not to embarrass anyone, but how many people, typically speaking, greater than 50% of the time, either read the newsletter at their kitchen table, on their couch, in their bed, or in their bathroom? And, you know, about half of those hands went up, you know, the people who had their hands up. And so you're not only are you spending time with them, you're spending time with them in, like, crazy intimate places. Like,
Right.
If you're reading my story while you're, you know, doing your business in the bathroom, like, we got a bond, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
something that we've connected on another level. So yeah, we don't take returns of that newsletter, kind of like Seinfeld in the Costanza book. Like, you can't send that back to us at that point. But no, have you seen that one? I don't know. So
Yeah.
sometimes the jokes hit, sometimes they don't, folks. It's just
No,
like,
anytime you can drop a Seinfeld reference on any of our webinars, you're welcome to do it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so look, the interesting thing about doing a newsletter is that it's actually media you own. I don't know if anybody else is tired of you know, Facebook ads needing to be changed every 5 seconds, or you know, this rule was okay to market this way online, and now it's not okay to market this way online. And you know, I know at one point many years ago, like in 2007, I got banned from AdWords for one of my companies because we were selling a course, and they decided that we couldn't sell courses in that category anymore, and we got banned from AdWords. I lost a whole business over that. You know, the ad cost of Facebook has doubled in the last 12 months, right? So you're getting these leads, but they're costing you double what they were. And so
The saturation, and it's also how often are you even being presented?
Sure, totally. I know we can talk about quality of lead as well too, but that's a different story for another webinar. But so now we talk about why you must own your own media. See, a newsletter is media you own. We might create it for you, but you're the owner of the media. And when you own that media, it allows you to communicate on your terms. You can pretty much say whatever you want in the newsletter. And I always say pretty much is because, like, we've got to actually, like, well, if one of my writers has to write it, you know, we're not going to, like, discriminate or something, right? But you can pretty much say whatever you want in your newsletter. It is your newsletter. You own it. You have it on your terms. When you build relationships, right, that turns into more clients because it turns into referrals. If they don't know who you are, what you do, and that you're still in business, they can't refer you, okay? It also returns into repeat business. So I'm kind of combining 2 and 3 here, right? It returns into repeat business. And the final thing is if you have different lines of business that you work under. So if you do PI and criminal law, maybe it would be a good idea that they know you do both. And I'll share a little side story on that. With one of our law firms, They're out of Boston area. They've been with us for a number of years now. And I can't remember why I ended up on this phone call, but for some reason I ended up taking this phone call a few years ago. And I'm so glad I did. It was this guy out of Boston, him and his partner have a law firm, and they did criminal and PI work. That was what they did. And they're like the nicest guys too, super good lawyers, very nice guys. And so I'm chatting with them, and I said, well, you know, one of my common questions is, what made you decide to call us now, right? And he's like, Sean, I had a really unfortunate incident happen to me, you know, a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago. And he goes, I was going out to dinner with my family, and I run into this, you know, old quasi high school buddy of mine. And I say quasi because, like, he was a grade younger than me, but I knew him, and you know, and I had helped him out of a few minor criminal jams over the years. So I was like reading between the lines. I'm like, okay, some petty theft or DUI or something like that, right? And so he's like, I helped him out over a few minor criminal jams, and he is having like this crazy party. There are tons of people there, and they're drinking, they're being rowdy and having a good old time. And so I walk over to say hi, you know, right? I mean, of course, why? Of course you would. So I walk over, I say hi, and start chatting with him. And he's like, oh my goodness, you'll never believe what just happened. He goes, we're celebrating. The judge just came down on my personal injury case. I got $5 million. I'm rich. And so the lawyer looks at him. I gotta imagine, like, his just every bit of color in his face like went away, right? I mean, I assume I'm surprised he didn't pass out. And he's like, Jim, why didn't you call me? Didn't you know we do PI cases as well? And he's like, oh man, no, I had no idea. I thought you were only criminal. Can you imagine, like, a $5 million rate? What was that, like, for my lawyers on? Some of them are like pulling out calculators doing the math. Like, that's 1.4 million dollars maybe. Could be even $2 million if they were getting 40% of the PI case. Like, I mean, that is an insane amount of money lost solely because he only knew them as criminal attorneys, right? Yeah. So you got more referrals. You can increase that lifetime value because they know everything it is that you do. Another one of my buddies, we weren't buddies before he was a client, but now he's a client. We've become really good friends. In fact, we're going to Vegas together in September, like on a guy's trip with a bunch of us and stuff. And he's a great guy, and he owns a PI firm in Atlanta. And we work with lots of people that aren't just PI, but these two happen to be PI attorneys. And so he when he started, he tells me his story is that he called around to all of his past clients, like not all of them, but like in the last 6 months, case that had closed, because he couldn't figure out why they weren't getting any referrals. Right. And he's like, I called about 100 people, and I had never been hung up on more, told I was on the do not call list. He's like, they had no idea who I was. Just didn't. He said, regardless of size of check, he goes, less than 10% of people even knew who we were when I called them. And so, man, if they don't know who you are, it's really difficult to refer you, right? You know. Another point, if we look at point 5 here, that people so overlook, like they just completely overlook this, is your authority and then even celebrity. Celebrity is so big in our world right now, and you can be that local celebrity, right? You can be their friend in the legal business. You know, I mean, if I was a lawyer, I'd want, regardless of where I practice in law, I would want anytime someone had a problem to literally be like, call my lawyer, right? You know, call my lawyer, because they knew who I was, they knew I was a lawyer, they knew I'd get them to the right people or I'd help them, you know, because I'm like the celebrity attorney, and they just always have me at the top of my mind, you know, right? And then of course, when you own media, you control media. You know, the post office doesn't one day say like, hey, you're banned from mailing stuff. Like, that doesn't happen. So you can, when you control that media, there's so much power in being able to do that, right? And so see, here's what I see people make a mistake on though when they try to do a newsletter, is first they want to go email only. And we've kind of talked about that earlier, so I won't jump in on that too much. But the email only thing is just, it's crazy. Average lifespan of an email is 8 seconds. You're not getting readership, and without readership, a newsletter is a waste of time and money. You might as well send my boring one out, right? Because no one was reading it, it wasn't working. Same thing there. So the next thing I see people make a huge mistake on is not mailing monthly. Now, there's a difference. There's 2 things I want to say about this. First is, you have to mail monthly. No good relationship only has communication like once a quarter. Like there's no such thing as we're close, but we only talk once a quarter. Okay, they may want to refer you, but not think about you because you're in an off month on the quarter. And we send out so many newsletters. And I'm just telling you, I can't get it to work. I have tried. I've tried. We have probably the largest testing ground for print newsletters out there, and one of the larger ones for email, email newsletters as well too, because we do give everyone a digital version of their newsletter, and we get to see what works and what doesn't work. And I'm telling you, I can't get it to work despite all of my marketing experience, all my experience in newsletters, and all my testing. So if you're doing it quarterly, you got to step up your game a little bit there. You're going to be disappointed if you don't, right? The next thing, after I clear the pop-up there, is they don't open up and get personal. That is like that's where that celebrity comes in. That's where that relationship gets built. Now we can coach you, and in my book we tell you like how to do that appropriately, right? So there's ways to do it where you don't have to go over every single thing in your life. And then depending on what kind of law you practice, you got to be careful what you say too, because if you're like a bankruptcy attorney, you don't want to be talking about your last Bahamas vacation for 2 weeks that was amazing, and
right.
you had stayed at the Ritz and all this kind of stuff. Like that maybe possibly could be in bad taste, So I know you're broke, but I'm rich, baby, and we're having a good time. That's not ideal. So that's you got to be careful there. Oh, well, you know what? I guess they got this set up. I'm going to go over a few of these topics right now. So let's talk about the 5 topics you can open up about. Okay, here's what you want to do. You want to make a list of topics that make sense for you to open up about. This list is just a list, right? You can pick your 5 if you want. So talk about your family. I do this all the time. I talk about my boys in the newsletter. And a lot of times I tie it back around to a business lesson, but sometimes not. Sometimes I'm just trying to build a relationship with them. You can talk about stories as an entrepreneur. You're the attorney. You are an entrepreneur, even though you're an attorney, right? It's one and the same there. And so you can talk about business stories if that's appropriate for if you're going to a business niche, right? So you can talk about those. You can talk about life experiences. What happened in the past and what good lesson did you learn, right, from that? So family vacations and holidays, unless you're in bankruptcy law, you never want to do that then. Divorce law, a divorce attorney, that's actually not quite ideal too. Like your happy spouse, your 3 kids, and they're like crushed because they didn't, dad gets the newsletter, he's crushed because he doesn't get to see the kids but once a month or whatever, right? Lessons learned in business. But let me take this a step further for you, okay? So I'll take it a step further. What if you're like a huge Disney fan? Well, guess what? You could talk about Disney and your love of Disney, and that's something you can open up about. What if you're a huge college football fan? Like, I love college football. If I was to turn the camera over here, you would see I'm a big Boise State fan. I've got they always have Bring the Hammer, and so I literally have a Boise State hammer autographed by some of my favorite players. I've got a couple helmets in the back here that are autographed by some of my favorite all-time players from Boise State and stuff. So I can talk about my love of college football because guess what? There's a lot of people who love college football. And so I can go on and on and on here about these topics, but pick 5 to 7 topics that you're comfortable sharing. And then if you've got some topics you're not comfortable sharing, don't talk about those ones, right? So it's pretty simple there. Now,
and I think it really makes it easy for people to get in and to start to develop content when they realize that they don't have to, that it can be everyday things that they'd be talking to their friends at a barbecue about.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to know what kind of content works, you can literally just look at Facebook. People are spending time reading Facebook, right? That content mix works, okay? And so here you go. You've got, out to the ball game, right? And here's a newsletter, about the great memories and spring training and all this kind of stuff. And that's the cover page. And so now the way we do it is we call our clients, we get on the phone about 15, 20 minutes, we interview them, and then we write these stories for them, right? That's how we create them. But you could sit down and type this out and write this up, if you wanted to and stuff. And then of course we get their pictures and we put them in, and that's how we take care of creating a newsletter. And so, so that's a fun.
And that was the process that I went through, with your team of the logistics and the importance of monthly sending. So I want to talk about that because having a system in place and the timeline for print and mailing, and if it drops, like in marketing and direct mail, we talk about when is the drop happening, and if the drop doesn't happen until Friday, then it's probably not going to hit their mailboxes until the following week. So having a team that has the ability to work with fulfillment houses, knows what, and you actually have all of the print equipment in-house, is that right?
Yeah, actually, we do it all in-house. So all the employees work in-house, all of the fulfillment's done in-house. It's the only way I can control the entire process, right? And so I do it all in-house, and that way we have full quality control. Even our editors, we have a team of editors. Every article is seen by 4 different editors, and it's done that way so that I can control quality and make sure that only the best product goes out, right? As opposed to like, man, I hope that printer doesn't screw up, or he doesn't get that out late, or whatever the case may be, right? So
yeah, and accommodate for holidays and other things like that might be out of your control when you're working with a fulfillment house as opposed to someone.
And rush orders and everything. I mean, everything that goes into getting a product out, right? So yeah, I mean, that's, we take care of the whole thing. Our average client spends between their whole company, not just the client, right? So the whole firm spends between an hour and 90 minutes a month to get the newsletter out, and then we do the rest. And so it's pretty simple. Most of that time is spent in the 20 minutes of doing the interview, and then we send you a first draft, second draft, final draft, right? So someone's reviewing those drafts, and so that's where most of the time goes into.
And that's incredible. I mean, it's rare that you see an email newsletter in MailChimp go out in less than 90 minutes. So, sure. I mean, it's like totally different ends of the spectrum. And the examples that you have up on the screen, I mean, I was completely serious when I said this is like magazine quality. And I love that in so much of your work for the practice areas where it's appropriate, you're folding in pictures of their family, things that they're doing in the community, things with their kids. It's not about the area of law, it's that you practice. It's about how relatable you are, and that people buy from people that they know and that they like and they trust, and that they see what's going on a regular basis.
Well, so yeah, so think about it like this, like, okay, there's, what, 500,000 small lawyers out, small law firms out there, right? Something like that. I mean, there's an incredible amount, and just having that degree, us normal folks, what we think? Oh man, they must be a good lawyer. Like literally, that's what people think right off the bat. Now, is that accurate or fair or correct? Of course that's not, right? I mean, there's varying degrees. I've worked with a lot of lawyers. Actually, I have a ton of lawyers are as friends, and I know some of them who are amazing. I know some of them, I get to hear some of the struggles they're having, and I'm like, well, maybe we need to step up our game over here a little bit, right? And so but everyone's not created equal, but that's what that's what normal folks think, right? They're a little bit scared of the law. And so the only thing you have, right, not the only thing, but one of the few tools in your arsenal is you. Be you, and you will attract people who feel that connection, right? People who remember spring training with their dad and they see that picture, there, right? And they have that instant connection with you. And the craziest thing is people make the weirdest connections. It baffles my mind sometimes, the connections, the way they make connections. But I had one guy who read my book, and in my book I tell the story of having a kid at 16 years old, and this young man calls me up and wants to chat with only me. And so I get on the call with him, and I'm talking with him, and he's telling me about his business idea and what he wants to do. And I talked with him for a few minutes. He's like, man, thank you so much. I feel like we are so connected, like we just have such similar stories. I mean, you had a kid really young, and here I am, I'm 24, getting ready to have my first kid, and I'm thinking to myself, there is nothing similar to having a kid at 16, having a kid as a kid, to you being a grown-ass man having a kid,
Right.
Nothing similar. But he felt that connection, and so far be it for me to break the connection that he feels, I guess, and so wherever they feel the connection, and it's amazing where people will make those points in when they decide they like you and they want to connect with you. So yeah, but all good points.
Open the door and show that vulnerability. And yeah. We've got a couple questions coming through. So do you want to go ahead and jump on them?
Let me run through this part real quick. Do you want me to jump through this real quick, then we'll grab questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just so I can tell them what to put. Actually, in fact, maybe we can just have them get the book. we'll send it to them for free, because this walks them through and they'll get this template so they
Oh,
can build
great.
their own. Maybe we should do that, because that might be a little bit more beneficial to them when we can go into more in depth. So why don't you fire away at some of those questions?
Okay, so any tips for overcoming writer's block to come up with interesting content?
Yeah, totally. So I personally write a lot of our own newsletter, and sometimes it is hard to sit down at the keyboard. So I will tell you, there's a couple of ways of doing that. The way like professional copywriters overcome it is they actually just start writing. And what I mean by that is there are some people who will write the same word over and over and over again. There are some people who just start telling a story, any story, even if it's a bad story and not going good, and they're going to delete most of it, right? But they start telling a story. And that's a lot of times what I will do is I will start telling a story. And if you were to pull up my laptop right now, you'd probably see 3 or 4 started stories that were not very interesting and not very good, that then sparked the idea for what I actually wrote about. So that's one way. The second way is on my phone here, I keep a running, I keep like just a note in there. And anytime I run up a good idea, I jot down not only what the idea is, but like a sentence or two about it to jog my memory when I'm going to come back. Because I found that when I would just put the idea, I wouldn't have a good sentence or two in there, and it wouldn't jog my memory. And then I'd be like, I have no idea what I was talking about before, right? So that's where that's what I would do there. I think I'm going to pop out of this because I think you're going to need control back, right?
Yeah, I'm going to grab control, and what we'll do too is I'm going to go ahead and put the place where they can get the newsletter book from you. So one second. Perfect. There we are.
Yeah, we'll cover all the shipping and everything for everyone, so they don't have to worry about that, about paying for that. And then I'll give them I'll give them an opt-in number, I guess. Is it? So
yep, and we've got.
Yeah, so let me tell them how to get it. So I'll put it in the chat here as well. Oh, there it is. Yeah, perfect. So go there. We're going to send you this really cool kit. It'll have more than just the book in it, but we'll cover everything. Like I said, all the shipping and handling, and it'll walk you through that template step by step, how to create your own. And then if you want our help, we can totally help you. But if you want to do it on your own, this is like the go-to guide for creating your own newsletter. So what other questions?
What is the ideal length for a firm newsletter? 4 pages, 8 pages? And I saw you had some great examples of what goes in the inside, and what's your recommendation, Sean? Yeah,
so 4 pages is for 97% of businesses that will work. And so I would probably tell you just definitely start with 4 pages. If you want to go more later down the road, that's up to you, but there usually isn't much of a need. The only thing you might do is an insert. So let's say you came out with your own book you were promoting, you might promote that via an insert, or if you were doing a client appreciation event, that could be on an insert, something along those lines. And as far as content on the inside, on page 2, you want content that's going to help the ideal prospect or client, right? So your average person. So if you're in immigration law and you focus on the Hispanic market, then that's going to be stuff that would be of interest to your Hispanic clientele, right? If you're divorce attorney, you focus on females, 35 to 50, then that's going to be stuff that is interesting to females 35 to 50. And so that's where you're going to kind of put some of that stuff in there. If you do any kind of want referrals, you talk about referrals in there. You could talk about you want a take a break section, which is, think of that as the Sunday funnies. That usually goes at the bottom of page 3, really important section in there. It actually gets a lot of extra readership because of that. So those are a couple ideas, but you'll have more that you can go through. Like I said, in the book, we'll send it to you. You'll see all the ideas there.
Excellent, and thank you so much for giving that resource away. Everybody who's on with us this afternoon should definitely take advantage of that. A couple more questions that we have from the audience. Do you do a separate newsletter for your referral sources as you do potential clients, or do both of them get the same thing?
A lot of times, both of them can get the same newsletter. Usually what most people do is we don't have to do a totally separate newsletter. What we do is what we call page variation. So for example, we will vary page 2 of the newsletter, the inside page 2. We'll take that and we'll do a completely separate page there that speaks to the interests of the referral sources. right? And so if you do that, we find that that works really well, but then you don't have to create an entirely separate newsletter. Now, if you've got a huge number of referral sources, right? So you're talking 400 or 500 of them or whatnot that you're marketing to, maybe at that point it makes sense doing a completely separate one. But if we're talking about 50, I would just do the page variation, is usually good enough.
Okay. And then are there any content types or pieces that could be included that might increase the chances of a reader hanging on to the copy, such as a checklist?
Yes. So you know what works really well, actually. A lot of people, some people, this has like a bad, they think this is bad and they shouldn't do it, or it makes it cheesy, but recipes. Recipes work really well, but here's what you've got to understand is they may cut the recipe out, but it's where you place the recipe that matters. So you want to place the recipe at the bottom of page 3, okay? And then right under the recipe, you want your law firm name, either the website or the name, and then your phone number. And so when they cut out the recipe, they cut it out with your name and your phone number. So every time they go to use that recipe, there's a little impression there of you as the person who gave them the recipe. So that's one way. And then it's all about valuable content. So we sell business to business, and I have signed multiple people's binders, like autographed multiple people's binders, where they've saved every newsletter that I've sent them. And so the more valuable the content, the more likely you're going to have them retain them. But according to the post office, naturally, the average person retains a newsletter for 4 months. So it lingers around the home or office, which gives it really good pass around value, so they can give it off to a friend or just get an impression because it's sitting on their counter and they see it as they're going by, or whatever the case may be. But it already lingers on average for 4 months according to the post office.
Excellent. And do you suggest pointing people in the print newsletter to read additional or related content on your website?
That works a little bit. I think that, when I have them in a vacuum, right, which is the newsletter, they're in a vacuum, there's nothing else distracting them. I don't want to get them to stop reading that and go to the website. What I'd rather get them to do is, for example, go to the website because I want them to take some kind of action. So I would usually point them to some kind of action. Go get my book, go get this cool checklist download here, what to do when you're in a car accident, print it off in your car and put it in your car. Like something along those lines is usually when I send them over. Now, the exception to that is if you need to educate them to sell them, right? So now we're talking about prospects that need to be educated first in order for them to buy, then that makes a lot more sense. So a little bit, it depends on the strategy that you're trying to work on and who it is that we're talking to.
Okay. And I think, does anybody have any additional questions for Sean? Feel free to enter them in now. We've got a few more minutes. And also, while we're waiting for questions, go ahead and text for your copy of the book and the newsletter kit. And then how long, if they were to start working with the Newsletter Pro, how long does it take from the time that you have your first discussion to when the newsletter goes out the door?
Yep, our average client takes 29 days right now, but we literally just had this divorce attorney in Florida who really wanted to get one out, and hers was out in 10 days. If you want to beat the record, it's 7 days. So you're going to have to hustle though on that one.
And that comes, I think, with any marketing partner or provider, you get out of it what you put in. I really feel like that's, a piece of the magic formula of if you attend the calls and you're thoughtful and you're not distracted, you're not on your phone, you're not checking email while you're going through the interview, that you're going to get that quality out and you're going to get those timelines.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll find that we've got a great process because you get your own project manager, your own writer, your own graphic designer. They're the same people every month. You actually have, it's actually a team. There's 10 people assigned to your account, but you're mainly dealing with one designer, one writer, one project manager, and then you have editors in the background as well too that are on your team. But you'd be amazed, like the relationship that our attorneys build with the writers. They are experts at telling this and making it sound like you wrote it. And I can literally, I could share testimonial after testimonial after testimonial, unsolicited, of people writing in talking about how amazing our writers are. So to give an example, this isn't a law example, but I just read this at our Monday meeting, all company meeting. One of our writers we write for this large CrossFit gym, and his newsletter, his article from his newsletter for his cover that was written by our writer was picked out by CrossFit to be their featured article in their next newsletter that's going out to a couple, 100 or 150,000 people, right? And so they think this gym owner wrote it, and in all reality, our client, my team member over here wrote it in the gym member's voice, right? And it got picked by CrossFit International basically to go into their newsletter as a featured piece. And so, we become very, very, very good at writing in your voice, and makes it very easy. And you actually build quite a relationship with the writer usually, which makes it even easier because they really get to know you, on a more personal level. So.
Excellent. And then next question is, do we own the content even if you write it? So.
It's a great question. I feel like this is a question asked by a lawyer. Yes, 100%. So here's how that works. Yeah, here's how that works. If it is custom content that we write for you, you own it. If you're like, hey, Sean, can you throw a recipe in there or whatnot? Well, then that's, even if it's a healthy recipe, unless it's your recipe type of a deal, then that is still owned by us because we may reuse that. But yes, any custom content we create, and we create many, I think we're up to over 1,000 pieces of custom content a month right now, I want to say. Maybe 1,200 even. Yeah, that's all owned by you, and we not only do we encourage you to reuse it, we will give you our opinion on how best to reuse that content, on your blog and social media. We'll give you the Word document so you can upload that. But yes, it is 100% your content. All the custom stuff we create, even if it's not interviewing you. So for example, you're like, hey, Sean, can you guys go research this really cool family-friendly activity that's happening in my area? Just go find one and research a really cool one to write about. That's custom content for you still. So you own that. That's your piece.
Well, and I love that. It's mirroring the voice and doing research in the local community so that it feels like it's something that could have been written in your office, and that's what makes it work. So,
totally.
Well, thank you so much, Sean. Was there anything else that you'd like to cover today before we wrap up?
I think that's it. I mean, if we can help in any way or answer any questions, we'd love to. And make sure you grab a copy of the book, and that'll definitely answer a lot. And it just was an honor to be on here, and hope we can support your crew as much as possible. So.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll email everyone on today's webinar. We'll receive a link to the recording within the next 24 hours, as well as the number in case you didn't have a chance to text now, or look for that email, and make sure that you take advantage of the kit, because there's tons of great information. If you've ever sent a newsletter before, you know how much work can be involved, and all of Sean's tips make the process a lot more manageable. So thanks, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Chelsea.
No problem. We'll talk to everybody soon. Have a great rest of your day.